The only time I ever saw a colonel open a formal after-action report with the words, "I was wrong," was the morning I read Harlow's Kessler submission. 3 pages, typed, submitted through proper channels, no redactions requested. I've read probably 400 after-action reports in my career. Most of them open with mission designation, unit composition, weather at time of contact. "I was wrong" appeared at the top of exactly one of them. That's where I need to start. Because what happened at Kessler Ridge didn't make any news cycle, and the people who know about it mostly don't talk about it, and the one person who should get credit went home 6 weeks after the action and never discussed it with anyone, as far as I can tell. Her name isn't the point. The call sign is Dust Anvil. That's the one that matters. I'm a Joint Terminal Attack Controller. Kessler Sector at that time. I work fires, I call in air. I live on a radio and a map and a set of grids. And on a good day, I put steel exactly where it's needed, and nothing else gets touched. On that particular Tuesday, I was running a secondary net from Firebase Callan, about 11 kilometers northeast of the ridge, and I didn't know there was another controller working the primary net until the third strike, when I heard the transmission and stopped what I was doing. The voice wasn't Harlow's. It wasn't Deeks, the primary controller for the element. It wasn't Fitch or Bramall or anyone else from Harlow's Fire's shop that I recognized. The delivery was different, cleaner and quieter, the kind of cadence you don't develop in 6 months or a year. I logged the call sign, Dust Anvil. Then I went back to my own sector and didn't ask questions. Because in the middle of a contact, you don't slow down someone else's net to satisfy your own curiosity. I found out later who it was. We all did. Here's what I know about Fire's work. The people who are good at it are identifiable by their transmission rhythm. Not by speed, not by volume, by the economy of the thing. A controller who is rattled will put extra words in, will repeat himself, will let the clock pressure bleed into the delivery. A controller who has done this before will use exactly the words required and no others. And the silence between calls will be working silence, not empty silence. You can tell the difference inside the first 30 seconds. What I heard that third transmission was working silence. I logged the call sign and moved on, and I told myself I'd ask about it when the sector was quiet. By the time the sector was quiet, I already knew from Keel's forwarded report what those transmissions had been. That's the last time I'll wonder about an unfamiliar call sign without getting the answer right then. The timeline starts 2 days before the ridge. Colonel Harlow processed a joint element into the Kessler sector on a Sunday evening. 7 personnel, 4 from Bravo Company's assault element, 2 from a signals detachment, and a combat controller named Warrant Officer Lena Karras, attached from a forward support group. Her personnel file, as Harlow's S1 logged it at intake, listed her primary MOS as 1Z4X1 and her current assignment status as observer, non-shooting, administrative attachment pending reallocation. That's the file language. Observer, non-shooting, administrative attachment pending reallocation. What the file didn't say, because nobody opened it past the cover sheet, was this. Karras held a fully current jtac certification. She had 9 confirmed solo fires missions on her record from the previous deployment. She had directed close air support for a 6-hour isolated element contact in the Morale Corridor the year before, under conditions that a theater air liaison officer later described in a separate document as the most technically demanding controller environment he had reviewed in 22 years of fires work. That assessment was filed with her personnel record. Her personnel record wasn't opened at intake. Harlow's S1 read the MOS code and logged her as she appeared on the first page. At the mission brief on Sunday night, Harlow gave her a position with the signals element at the secondary observation post. 300 meters behind the primary line. She'd be on the net, he said. She could monitor. If something developed, one of his people would handle it. She asked whether she could carry her own radio. Harlow said the words he would later type into the first paragraph of a formal document, a document he submitted to the theater record because he wanted the correction somewhere permanent. That's not your job this week. She took the secondary OP position. She carried her radio anyway, bundled with her kit, and didn't make an issue of it. SSGT. Tomas Keel, running signals for the detachment, standing 4 feet away at the brief, told me she didn't argue. She nodded once, picked up her kit, and walked to the vehicle. That's all. No visible reaction, no pushback. She just went. The primary element pushed onto the ridge at 0530 Tuesday. By 0640, they were compromised. a three-sided encirclement that came from above the primary OP and cut the withdrawal route in under 40 minutes. Harlow's assigned controller, Staff Sergeant jtac, took a fragment hit at 0712 that took him off the net permanently. The primary radio survived, but jtac was the only one who held the current authentication codes and the standing engagement authorizations. Without him, the element had no fire support. 4 Bravo Company personnel and 2 signal specialists, pinned under fire from 3 elevated positions on a north-facing ridge, with no cover and no corridor out. Karis had been at the secondary OP since 0530. She heard the contact develop on the monitoring channel. She heard the quality of the primary net change the moment jtac stopped transmitting, and she knew what that change meant. She waited 4 minutes. Keel timed it. He told me this later, 4 minutes exactly, and he described it as the most deliberate 4 minutes he'd witnessed in 13 years of service. Long enough to be certain jtac wasn't coming back. Short enough that the element still had options. Then she keyed her radio and called fires. What followed was 6 hours and 9 strikes. I heard the 3rd transmission, and the 4th, and then the 7th through the 9th. The ones I heard were this: a controller running a complete fire support stack from a secondary observation, post with no assigned mission, no formal authorization for her current role, and no one directing her. The delivery was flat and exact, not rushed, not hesitant, grid, elevation, friendly's position, with a hard offset, talk on, authentication, every piece in the right order, every element complete. She was doing all of it from a position she'd been told wasn't her assignment, on a radio she'd been told wasn't her job, for a contact she'd been told someone else would handle. The 3rd cleared the northern fire position that had the element's left flank pressed against the rock face. The 4th opened the withdrawal corridor, 40 meters wide at its narrowest, barely enough, but enough. The 5th and 6th were methodical, working an eastern position that had started walking rounds down the spine of the ridge. Between the 5th and 6th, she ran a full correction, without confirmation from the ground element, because the ground element's radio operator had taken a secondary blast concussion and wasn't transmitting coherently. She ran the correction off her own data and her own judgment about where the element had to be, given the position of the fire and the movement patterns from the earlier transmissions. She got it right. The 7th strike caught a secondary position that no one on the primary element had yet reported. She had triangulated it from the timing interval between 2 incoming rounds that didn't match the pattern of the established positions. A sound pattern deviation that required her to hold the noise of an active contact in her head and isolate one thread of it. She put the correction data on it 40 seconds before that position would have come into play against the egress route. Keel told me that when he heard that transmission, he looked at her. She was already working the next calculation on the map board. She did not look up. The 8th strike held the corridor open. The 9th at 1341 put the egress route clean enough to move. The primary element walked out. All 4 Bravo Company personnel, both signal specialists, one with a through-and-through in the left forearm, one with a concussion. jtac was at the aid station by then, nobody else. Karis packed her kit when the last element cleared and walked back to Firebase Calson on foot. 11 kilometers. She filed her mission log with the signals detachment because Harlow's controller shop wasn't expecting one from her, and it went into the intake tray with the daily signals summary. It sat there until the following morning when Keel found it and put it on Harlow's desk. Harlow read it. Then he pulled her file, actually opened it, all of it, every page, the jtac certification, current and valid, the Morale Corridor citation, the Air Liaison Officer's assessment, the 9 prior confirmed missions. He read the full record. I'm told he read it twice. Then he requested a formal review of the Kessler action, and he wrote the after-action report himself, rather than delegating it to his S3. And he didn't share a draft with anyone before submitting, and that report opened with 3 words. I was wrong. He didn't accompany those words with hedging language. He didn't write that procedures had been followed in good faith or that intake data had been incomplete. He wrote, I was wrong, and then he documented what had happened at Kessler in full, methodically, because that is how you correct something. Not by explaining the conditions that produced the error, but by making the true record permanent. He submitted it through proper channels. He requested that her mission log be recorded against the Kessler action. He requested that her certification status be corrected in the theater personnel system. He cited each of the 9 strikes by transmission timestamp, named the call sign, and in the final paragraph he wrote that the encircled element survived, because a controller he had told she was not needed had decided to bring her radio anyway. Harlow was not a man who apologized easily. I'd worked in his sector 8 months by then. He was a good officer and a hard one, and he did not like being wrong in any documented sense. Submitting that report cost him something real. He submitted it anyway. I read it because Keel forwarded it to the fire's net as a planning reference. I went back to the transmission logs and found the 7th strike, the secondary position call. I listened to the audio 3 times before I fully understood what she had done. 2 data points, 40 seconds, 1 correction, exactly right, to a position nobody had even seen yet. Some people are just built for it, for the work, the quiet, the calculation, for holding a net together with nothing but voice and numbers, when there's no one else on it, and the decision to transmit is yours, alone. I thought I was good at it. I still think I'm reasonably good at it. But I heard those 9 transmissions, and I understood something about the gap between capable and extraordinary that I hadn't understood before, and I don't think I will forget it. She shipped out 6 weeks after the action. Keel keeps in contact with her, or did, as of last year, and she doesn't discuss Kessler when he asks. No explanation given. She just doesn't. The formal system now shows what she was. A fully certified joint terminal attack controller with a confirmed fires record. Corrected after the review. On file. Permanent. What the system still doesn't show, because there's no field for it, is what it takes to sit at a secondary observation post and listen to a contact, building for 2 hours and know what is coming, and wait the 4 right minutes, and then key a radio with a voice that has nothing extra in it and carry a fires mission alone for 6 hours on a ridge you were told wasn't your assignment, and then walk 11 kilometers back and file your log and say nothing about it to anyone. That part just happened. It was real. And then she went to bed. The paperwork took 3 words to correct.